Two aircraft worth over $200 million are sinking into the sand, and there's nothing anyone can do to move them. It's 8 o'clock in the morning on a dirt airstrip in southern Iran. The engines are still running, the heat is rising off the ground, but the wheels are buried, completely stuck. Outside the perimeter, Iranian Revolutionary Guard units are closing in. Inside one of those aircraft lies a wounded American officer who wasn't even supposed to survive the night. Around him, hundreds of special operations troops are waiting for an order that doesn't exist in any manual. No protocol, no backup plan, just a clock ticking down, and a decision that will cost more than money. Because in the next few minutes, someone will choose between saving a life or losing everything on the ground. But to understand how it got to this point, how one man ended up alone in the mountains of Iran, hunted, injured, and invisible to the world, you have to go back to the moment everything went wrong, back to a routine mission that turned into a nightmare in less than a second. It's early morning over southwestern Iran. The sky is clear, the airspace, at least officially, under control. Just days earlier, the U.S. Secretary of Defense had declared complete dominance over this region, total air superiority, no threats that couldn't be managed, no surprises that couldn't be contained. Inside the cockpit of an F-15E Strike Eagle, two men move with the kind of precision that only comes from years of flying together. In the front seat, the pilot. In the back, the weapons systems officer, the one managing sensors, targeting, and communications. The mission isn't unusual, not anymore. After 5 weeks of sustained operations, this kind of flight has become routine in a war that no one officially wants to call a war. Everything is steady, predictable, controlled, until it isn't. The impact comes without warning. No alert in time, no clear visual, just a violent jolt that rips through the aircraft like a shockwave. Alarms explode across the cockpit, every system screaming at once. The jet shudders, loses stability, starts to break apart midair. The pilot shouts something, but it doesn't matter. Training takes over. Eject. In less than a second, the decision is made. The canopy blows, the seat fires, and suddenly you're no longer inside one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world. You're falling through enemy skies. The force hits hard. Your spine absorbs most of it. Your leg doesn't fully cooperate. Pain sets in instantly, sharp and persistent. Below you, miles of unforgiving terrain stretch in every direction. No friendly ground, no safe zone. Just mountains, rock, and isolation. You hit the ground somewhere deep inside Iranian territory. The jet is gone. The mission is over. And now the situation has changed completely. Your pilot lands miles away. He'll be found within hours, rescued, extracted. You won't, because within minutes of the crash, you disappear from radar, and that changes everything. What was supposed to be a controlled operation suddenly becomes a national-level crisis. Not just a downed aircraft, but a missing American serviceman, alive somewhere behind enemy lines, injured, exposed, and now being actively hunted. In Tehran, the response is immediate. Revolutionary Guard units mobilize. Search teams spread across the region. Intelligence channels light up. A reward is quietly circulated, tens of thousands of dollars for information leading to your capture. Out in the mountains, that kind of money travels fast. Local groups armed and familiar with the terrain begin moving through the same valleys you just landed in. Not as soldiers, as opportunists, and you're caught in the middle of it. You have limited gear, a sidearm, a locator beacon, an encrypted radio. Enough to survive if everything goes right. But nothing about this is going right. You can walk, barely. Running is no longer an option. Every step is calculated. Every sound matters. Because out here, being seen once is enough. And what you don't know, what you can't possibly know, is that your situation has already escalated far beyond the mountains you're standing in. Because the moment you disappeared, you stopped being just a man trying to survive. You became a problem that the United States could not afford to lose. And while you're moving through the darkness, trying to stay alive one step at a time, hundreds of people across multiple continents are now working against the clock, tracking signals, analyzing terrain, preparing assets, all focused on one thing: getting to you before someone else does. But surviving the crash was only the beginning, because the real challenge is staying alive long enough to be found. Because from that moment on, survival becomes its own kind of mission. The first hours are the most dangerous, not because the terrain is impossible, but because the body is still running on shock. Adrenaline keeps you moving faster than you should. It dulls the pain just enough to make you reckless. One bad step on loose rock, one shift in weight at the wrong angle, and your injured leg reminds you exactly how fragile your situation really is. So you slow down, not because you want to, because you have to. Every decision now is stripped down to basics. Move only when darkness gives you cover. Stay low. Avoid open ground. Listen before every step. Don't use light. Don't waste a radio transmission unless it matters. In a cockpit, survival depends on speed and training. Out here, it depends on patience, discipline, and the ability to disappear. And disappearing is harder than it sounds. You're still wearing flight gear, built for altitude and combat aviation, not for freezing mountain nights in hostile territory. The cold doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it interferes with judgment. It slows reaction time. It turns simple choices into mental work. Long before a man realizes he's in real danger, the cold starts making decisions for him. That may be what makes the first night so brutal. Not just the pain, not just the isolation, the uncertainty, because somewhere out there, people are already looking for you. Iranian search elements are spreading through the region, and the pressure on them is not just military, it's political. Capturing a live American officer inside Iranian territory would be a propaganda victory of enormous value. A trophy. Proof that the narrative of total control had broken apart in a single morning. For Tehran, this is no longer just about one man in the mountains. It's about humiliation, leverage, and the chance to expose the gap between what Washington says publicly and what the battlefield is revealing in real time. That gap matters, because once governments make absolute claims, reality becomes dangerous. Every contradiction becomes strategic. Every missing detail becomes a liability. And now, somewhere between official confidence and operational chaos, one American officer is paying the price for all of it. At some point during that first night, someone helps you. Maybe one person, maybe more than one. You never get the full picture. There's no time for explanations and no reason to trust motives. It could have been sympathy. It could have been money. It could have been resentment toward Tehran in a region where central authority has never meant loyalty. By daylight, movement becomes too risky, so you hide, not in comfort, not in safety, just out of sight. Hours pass in silence, broken only by distant rotor noise and the kind of tension that locks every muscle in place. Helicopters move somewhere overhead, maybe American, maybe Iranian, maybe both. But from your position, uncertainty is more dangerous than fear. By the second night, your world has narrowed. Pain, cold, darkness, terrain. The leg still works, but not well. You can keep moving, just not fast, and definitely not forever. And in war, time is often the difference between rescue and disappearance. By now, more than a day has passed. You don't know the exact hour anymore. You don't need to. Your body keeps its own clock, measured in pain, in shivering, in the effort it takes not to panic. The beacon is still active. That is the one thread connecting you to home. Somewhere, Americans are watching a signal that proves one of their own is still alive. So you make one more radio transmission, brief, controlled, no wasted words, and then you wait for an answer that will tell you whether this mountain is about to become your grave or the place where the United States comes to bring one of its own home. Far from the freezing rock around you, that signal is now moving through command centers, intelligence channels, and secure rooms where the stakes are no longer tactical. They're national. Because once Washington knows exactly where you are, the mission changes. Finding you is no longer the problem. The problem now is how to reach you before the enemy does. After confirmation of the wounded officer's signal, the situation stops being an individual problem and becomes a high-risk military operation with global implications. Inside U.S. command centers, a race against time begins, bringing together intelligence, drones, satellites, and complex strategies to extract him from enemy territory. The mission now balances political and military risks. Moving too slowly could cost the soldier his life, while acting too aggressively could escalate the conflict. To gain an advantage, the United States employs a disinformation strategy, leading the enemy to believe the rescue will take place elsewhere, diverting attention and buying precious time. Meanwhile, Special Operations Forces prepare in silence, guided by a fundamental principle: leave no one behind. Even with advanced technology, factors such as time, terrain, and unpredictability remain real threats. On the ground, the wounded officer remains hidden, unaware of the movements unfolding around him. The sound of approaching forces heightens the tension as two sides converge on the same point: the rescuers and the enemy. The outcome will be inevitable, and when it comes, the operation will no longer remain invisible, potentially turning into a direct confrontation where any mistake could be fatal. The rescue enters its critical phase as helicopters reach the mountain at first light, increasing the risk of exposure. The initial plan partially fails as Iranian forces respond sooner than expected, turning the operation into a high-pressure confrontation. Despite overwhelming military power, drones, fighter jets, and helicopters, unexpected complications arise. One aircraft is damaged, and time begins to work against the Americans. Still, Special Operations Forces manage to locate and extract the wounded officer, who can barely stand and must be evacuated under enemy fire. Even with a successful extraction, the mission faces a new and serious problem. Two aircraft become trapped on unstable ground during the evacuation. With no possibility of recovery and the enemy closing in, the commander makes a difficult decision: to destroy their own aircraft to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. The operation ends with a successful rescue, but far from perfect. There were losses, failures, and high costs. The outcome reveals the reality of war. Even for a superpower, success comes with sacrifice. And once the fighting ends, another battle begins: the struggle to control the narrative. After the operation ends, another battle begins: the fight over the narrative. The United States presents the mission as a success. The officer was rescued and sensitive equipment did not fall into enemy hands. Iran, however, portrays the episode as an American failure, highlighting the destruction of aircraft as evidence of loss and vulnerability. Both versions contain elements of truth, but they are shaped to protect political and strategic interests. Contradictions in official accounts raise doubts about what really happened and reveal the effort to control public perception. At its core, the episode exposes the complexity of modern warfare, where success and failure coexist. More than numbers or official statements, the greatest cost was human. Decisions made under pressure, extreme risks, and sacrifices that often go unseen. The true strength demonstrated is not in the rhetoric, but in the actions. The commitment to leave no soldier behind, even in the face of failure, improvisation, and high cost. Still, uncertainties remain about crucial details of the mission, showing that, more often than not, the reality of war is hidden behind competing narratives. Because that is the part no operation report ever fully captures. The helicopters leave. The fire on the runway burns out. The headlines go live. And for a moment, it feels like something has been resolved. A man was found. A mission was completed. A line was drawn between loss and recovery. But war doesn't work that way. One extraction does not close a conflict. It doesn't reset the balance. It doesn't undo the pressure building across an entire region already stretched to its limits. It simply becomes another moment inside a much larger chain of decisions, some visible, most not. And while governments exchange statements and signals, something else remains unchanged. The war keeps moving. Aircraft launch again. Patrols continue. Intelligence channels stay active. In the middle of uncertainty, in the middle of contradiction, in the middle of political pressure and operational chaos, there are still men willing to step into hostile territory for one reason alone: to bring one of their own home. And they did. But the cost didn't end when the mission was over, because the next day the skies were still active, the tensions were still rising, and somewhere out there, another mission was already waiting to go wrong. If you made it this far, you already know. This isn't just a story, it's what modern war really looks like. So if you want more real operations, untold missions, and the truth behind what actually happens out there, make sure you subscribe to Military Schedule. Hit the like button and tell me in the comments, was this a success or a warning sign?